We all experience self-doubt to some degree or another. It is something that people have shame and fear about admitting. The last thing you want to do is admit that you might be a fraud.
Welcome to Holy Fractional, the podcast dedicated to elevating the role and success of fractional workers everywhere. I am your host, Andrew Graft. Holy Fractional, the future of work starts here, and it starts now. Welcome to the Holy Fractional podcast, everyone. I'm Andrew Graft here. Today on Holy Fractional, we have a very special guest here to talk about two of the most taboo topics in the world of solopreneurism. She is Meg Niman, and she is here to talk with us about self-doubt and imposter syndrome. Welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Before we get started, I have to say, today's episode of Holy Fractional is one that I have been waiting for since we first had the idea for this show. In fact, it was the repeated conversations with fractional after fractional and solopreneur after solopreneur about fear, about self-doubt, about imposter syndrome that helped spark the idea for Holy Fractional in the first place. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is a conversation that is long overdue, which is why I am so happy to welcome Meg to the show. For those who don't already know Meg, she is the founder of the Persona Project, a methodology that has been featured at South by Southwest, and it has been used by professionals everywhere to conquer the all too secret, yet all too common effects of doubt and imposter syndrome in the workplace. Meg, let's start by talking just a little bit about you. Tell us, first of all, how did you get involved with this whole subject of fear and doubt and helping people overcome them in their professional lives?
I'm somebody who's had fear and doubt my whole life. I am never shy to say that I have depression and anxiety. So that's where it all starts. But many people, even without those conditions, have it. And I think that for me, I've had an untraditional path, everything from having an interdisciplinary major where I took every course that I wanted and got a degree out of it, to being in the tech world and a user experience designer before people really knew who that was, to now being a solopreneur. I've kind of had to make it up as I go along. And in doing so, I've suffered from a lot of the things that we talk about in terms of doubt, in terms of imposter syndrome for sure, and just the weight of having to chart your own path. And so most recently, I've been a consultant. I've been working on the Persona Project, and I've been in the shoes of many of the folks that are listening. And I know that seesaw sort of experience, the highs and the lows, and basically came up with some strategies to help myself through it. Stumbled upon some of them, used my design thinking as a way to create others. And in doing so, I started to talk to other people about it, and they thought it was intriguing. Ran a pilot workshop. It went well, went to South by Southwest. People loved it. Worked with a number of different clients on my signature program. They've had incredible successes. And so the methodology has proven that it works, and some of my ideas have really resonated, but it's all come from my own desire to help myself first and foremost, and then realizing that it wouldn't be kind not to share it.
It is wonderful. And I'll tell you, for those just tuning in, the conversation here is about doubt. And we're not talking about everyday doubt. I mean, we all experience doubt from time to time. That's just part of being human. Clearly, not all doubt is a bad thing. It's designed to keep us safe from things that will harm us. Like, the first time we come to the edge of a cliff, it's a good thing that we doubt our ability to fly, right? I mean, we're not talking about all doubt. It's just that not all doubt is rooted in reality. In our minds and in our emotions, they can be greatly exaggerated. They can be self-sabotaging. Meg, from your experience, how common is it for people to experience this kind of self-doubt in their professional lives?
We all experience self-doubt to some degree or another. I think some of us listen to it more than others. And I think that the imposter syndrome version of self-doubt, and we'll talk a little bit about the different flavors of even that, it's in some ways more common than you think, because it is something that people have shame and fear about admitting. The whole point is that you're afraid that you're going to be found out as a fraud. So the last thing you want to do is admit that you might be a fraud. So it definitely is a reinforcing cycle. But I think that the notion that we have doubts and that we question our abilities is very human. The thing is whether it stops us from doing the things that we want, the things that we really care about, and sort of how much effort it takes in order to get over that hump into doing it. There are strategies and ways that we can soften that hump, make it a little bit easier to get over it. I'm all for that.
Well, there must be something particularly special about fractionals and solopreneurs, because I can tell you from my conversations, the ones that inspired today's show, I swear somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 60% on the low side and 85% on the high side of the fractionals and the solopreneurs I speak with, some of the smartest, most talented, most accomplished professionals I've ever met. That's one of the first things they want to talk to me about is, hey, what do you think? Am I doing this right? There are other things I'm supposed to be doing. Am I supposed to be more successful than I am right now? And I've got a job coming up. I've never had to do that before, but they're expecting me to do it. It was this recurring theme that underscored to me just how important this subject is. And then to your point, we have this tendency in our culture to not want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable and it's vulnerable and it's icky. And instead, our culture is always like, we're strong. We don't talk about our fears. We don't have any of those. We're going to manifest our success through willpower, and nothing's going to stop us. And as a result, I think there is, to your point, a certain amount of shame that people feel over their self-doubt. We're already failures for having fears of failure. I would assume you see that in your coaching.
I do. There's this quote that I came across because I'm a fan of a singer-songwriter named Iris DeMen. So she has this song called The Way I Should, and there's a line in it. She says, I realized I was playing into someone else's rules, trying to keep my score up in a game I didn't choose. And that stuck with me because until I broke out on my own, I was constantly trying to play by the rules that somebody else chose and a position that wasn't the best suited for who I am. It was what somebody else needed. And that's not to say that we don't need to have product market fit or that we don't need to make ourselves available to other people in meaningful ways. But I think for a lot of fractional folks, they've gotten past the idea of playing by somebody else's rules and they're making up their own game. They're choosing how they want to play. They're choosing the number of clients. They're choosing the number of hours. They're choosing the type of industry. But that also comes with the burden of setting all of the rules. And a lot of us haven't actually taken the time to be that intentional about the business that we're setting up and what we're going after. In the beginning, you're just so happy to have a client. And then you're so happy to have another client. And there's so much fear that you might not get the third client that you don't have the time, or you often don't make the time to really think, what is my bar of success? Is it that I have X amount of dollars in revenue? Is it that I'm able to take 2 months off throughout the year? Is it that I work 4 days a week? Maybe you work 8 to 3 and you always hang out with your kids at night. There's so many ways that we can define success. And if you haven't gone through the process of doing that and written your own job description, then of course your fears are going to come in. And then also just comparison is such a natural thing. And I think especially, at least in my experience as a solopreneur, I'm looking for community. I'm looking for how other people have done it. There isn't a great playbook about how to do this. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm seeing everybody's successes. I'm seeing all the beautiful things, and people are afraid to show you that they're struggling. So both things are in place. And I think just create this environment that makes you feel like I must be doing it wrong because everybody else is doing it so much better, or I must be doing it wrong because I've never done it like this before. Whereas neither of those are actually particularly helpful or even valid ways to evaluate your own success.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk for a minute about the nature of self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all these things. We can get that out on the table. In your coaching and in your writings, you break down self-doubt into 3 different subcategories to better surface really the source of that doubt and its relative legitimacy. Tell us a little about those subcategories.
This is really specific to the version of self-doubt that is imposter syndrome. And I feel like imposter syndrome has had its 15 minutes of fame and then has continued to swirl around. And there's lots of ideas and lots of things that people have to say. I read a lot about it. I personally suffer from it in different versions. The 3 types that I've identified that seem to be helpful is there's one version of self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which is just that you're not used to it. It's new. It's different. You don't have the skills. You are a novice. And I call that like the novice phenomenon. You're just new at it. And so, of course, these questions of, am I a fraud? Can I really do this? Somebody gave you a chance, or you created a chance for yourself to try something new. And you're wondering whether you're going to actually make the grade, whether you're going to be able to do it. It's a natural feeling. And usually that goes away as you get the reps in. And I think that oftentimes there's this conversation in imposter syndrome that it's like, oh, imposter syndrome isn't real. It's just that you're a beginner. And so I just want to acknowledge it's a thing. Some people call it imposter syndrome. It's just one version of it. The next is something that a lot of people that are in some version of marginalized, or in this political climate, it's interesting to figure out how to talk about this. But basically, if you're not fitting the norm, there are ways that the system make you to feel not capable, not qualified, not able to do the job. And so there's some really interesting writing, including a Harvard Business Review article that says, stop telling women that they have imposter syndrome. There's some women who have said, I'm not going to use that anymore because it's really society telling me that I'm not capable when I know I am. And by using imposter syndrome as this sort of crutch, it's legitimizing something that is really not a fair way to treat people. So I call that one gaslighting. It's really people telling you that you're not capable when you know you are. It can really mess with your mind. And so I don't want to ignore that. And I don't want to say that it's not true, but there are people who have been labeled as having imposter syndrome who say, I don't have that. I know my self-worth. I'm not worried about being exposed as a fraud, but I know that there's a risk that society might claim that I am. So that's the second version, which is this gaslighting into thinking that you're an imposter when you know you're not, but other people tell you you are. And then the third one is really the classic imposter phenomenon that was written about in the 80s. There's a short little paper. It's easy to read that is the genesis of imposter syndrome. The paper is called The Imposter Phenomenon and High Achieving Women. And there's critiques of this paper, but the essence of it is what I think likely a lot of your fractionals are talking about, which is this feeling that you are going to be found out as being an imposter and you are going to be exposed as a fraud. And it doesn't matter how many degrees you have on the wall, and it doesn't matter that you have 21 years of experience. It's all been a fluke. It's all because somebody was nice to you. It's all because you fooled them. And at some point, the shoe is going to drop and you're going to be found out.
You're exactly right. I think that is by far the most common flavor of what we hear. People who are, it's irrational. They can even tell you logically that they shouldn't be feeling this way, but their emotions and their body doesn't care. They are simply saying, I didn't used to feel this way, but all I know is I have some real fear that I can't cut the mustard, even though they've been cutting the mustard all the way along.
Yeah. And the most insidious part about it is that in general, having more success doesn't make it go away. So just because you cut the mustard in the past and then you cut the mustard again, which is a strange phrase as I say it out loud, I'm not quite sure what it comes from. It doesn't make you feel any less concerned that the next round you're going to mess it up royally and be found out. And that extra achievement is just one more thing that might crash down rather than proof that you're actually able to do the job.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing. I went through this recently myself. After 21 years of being a B2B marketer and lots of plaudits and lots of success and lots of things to point at, where I'm like, oh man, I am nailing this thing. And now I'm here in sort of fractional world and looking at opportunities and thinking to myself, well, I haven't done that before. And again, I intellectually know, no, of course you can do that. But emotionally, I can't overcome it. Do you have an opinion about why that's so hard to overcome emotionally, despite all of our logical proof to the contrary?
Yeah. The data that is there generally suggests that it's pretty deeply rooted, that it comes from sort of childhood experiences. That's the main thing that people point to. So I think if it's really preventing you from moving forward, therapy might actually be the right thing. I'm a big fan of therapy. It has helped me along the way. That said, I do think that as a creative, constraints actually help you to be more creative. Like you need a box to be in to then play off and figure out how to actually be creative. And I think when you go into something like Fractional, the box is gone. And it's almost like because there's nothing to play off, it's difficult for you to know how to measure things. And then I think you're grasping because you don't have the same rails that you used to have. You don't have a manager who's telling you what to do. You're coming in as the expert. You're supposed to tell them what they need. And so you're having to be in both a position of performing and evaluating. And that creates a really difficult situation.
Absolutely. In fact, before you and I was going through this and trying to figure out myself, what's going on here? When I was going through it, some of the research I did to understand why this exists is one of the ideas is this idea of an old mindset, but in a new context. I mean, when we've been successful in the past, it was in an environment that possessed the necessary feedback loops to validate our abilities and reinforce that confidence. But because new opportunities, they usually lack the certainty of an established feedback loop, our brains, we perceive that uncertainty as a lack of confidence instead of what it really is, just a learning curve in a new situation.
There's a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It's pretty great. And one of the things that he talks about is real artists don't call themselves artists because they're afraid to take on that term. They don't think they're good enough. If you meet somebody who calls themselves an artist, beware. They're probably just a schemer. And so in some ways, the self-doubt is because we are wanting to be good. We are wanting to be a professional. We are wanting to do a good job. But to your point, again, we've gotten rid of the rules. We now have to create them ourselves. Or sometimes, even if you're in a more structured environment, you're the outlier. You're the screenwriter who's now working for Microsoft. I saw that happen. I'm sure this person was questioning a lot of things about themselves. They were an incredible asset, but they're coming from a different world. And so it is unfamiliar and you question whether you know how to deal with it. The other place that people can get in trouble, and this is one that I struggle with a lot, is a fixed versus a growth mindset. So if you're in the position where you have sort of this fixed mindset and think that you innately can do things or that you're particularly good at something, which probably is what you've been doing for the past 21 years and part of why you've been successful, well, now you're in a situation where you likely have to do a lot more than that. Or you have to learn something new and you're not as good at it. And not being good at it, if you're really bought into a fixed mindset, can be very confronting because you're not thinking, oh, I can grow and learn how to do this. You're like, oh no, I can't do this. What's happening? The world has changed. And now I'm very scared and unsure what to do moving forward. So I think part of it really is recognizing the context that you put yourself into and recognizing that this imposter syndrome is not that unusual. It's like a normal reaction to the fact that things have changed and that the bar is changing, that the way that you're evaluating yourself is changing, and that even like the pressure of figuring out what success is has changed. All of that would make you start to wonder whether you can actually be successful.
So Meg, I heard you say you think you suffer from this? I don't imagine that that's possible. Are you saying you suffer from this?
I've had many a cry fest over imposter syndrome.
All right. So, and I mean, I don't know if you're talking like earlier today or if you mean months ago, but like, how does it manifest? In your case, what does that look like? I've told you for me, it's that I suddenly have a job pop up and like, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. What does it look like for you?
For me, it's a bit of the classic people pleaser and perfectionist. And so it can be things like over preparing for a presentation because I feel like I need to get it right. And then if I don't do all of that, it's all going to go horribly wrong. When I was working as a designer in tech, it was this constant feeling that I was out of place and that I didn't belong there. And that someday somebody was going to figure out that I was just making this all up and that I wasn't one of them. And so, for example, I'm wearing pink. I happen to wear a lot of pink. I went back and had a chance twice to see old like offsites, 2 different tech companies. And in both of them, I was like the only one wearing a color. I mean, designers, the canonical designer is like the black, black on black on black, just serious. And by the way, I can't draw. And all these people are like these sort of art. I'm like, I'm a musician. I play music. I don't draw. And so there were plenty of things I was doing that was absolutely the function of design. And a lot of how I think is exactly what the first principles of design are about. But I was looking at these surface level things and constantly comparing myself and feeling incredibly out of place. And I also was a very shy and slightly awkward kid. And so that feeling of like not being the one that fits in was a very old feeling. And so it just kept reinforcing itself in me. And so it didn't matter how many accomplishments I got. It was always like, oh, well, I've got a champion of a manager and that's why I got it. Or I happen to be good at this, but I won't be good at that. So I've had a quite varied career. I've done voice design. I've done virtual reality design. I've designed for self-driving cars. I've designed for the web. I've designed for mobile, in part to like prove to myself in this very dysfunctional way that I actually do have the skills. I keep trying different areas, almost making it as hard as possible for myself. And then proving that I can do it and then wondering, well, maybe I can't do it in the next place. So you literally can look at my career and see the imposter syndrome within it. And it was really, I think, when I became more of an independent contractor and a solopreneur that I've been able to become more comfortable with who I am. And because I can set the rules and take the reins from that, I've been able to get more past that imposter syndrome than I had in the past.
Well, I can see why fractionals would be so prone to this. We're a group of high achievers. We believe we can do this in the first place. We believe we've got a skill set that translates. And fortunately, some of you beautiful people out there already you've got your client set up long before you make this leap. But for those out there who are still navigating it, it makes 100% sense that these achievers, that skilled perfectionists would feel lesser than when the whole environment looks different.
Can I offer one other thing that just came to mind that I hadn't fully brought together before? I went on an RV trip for a year and it was a fantastic experience. What it taught me though was there's this sort of romanticism about like, oh, you're in an RV, you get to, have all this time for yourself. Like it's so wonderful. And my guess is that people that backpack around Europe have experienced the same thing, which is you spend a lot of your time just figuring out how to do normal, basic things. Like, where are you going to get groceries? And where are you going to get water? And we were in a tiny little van RV. So we spent inordinate amounts of time unpacking and then repacking. And it made me actually realize how valuable it is to be in one place.
Yes.
In a community where you know where your grocery store is, you know who your friends are, you know all the things. And so if I were to relate it, I think that there's something about being a full-time employee that those pieces are just there for you. We underestimate the amount of emotional energy and the amount of thinking and time that has to go into all of those pieces that are now on our shoulders to set up, including our own metrics of success and our own definition of what the job looks like.
Absolutely. Okay. We've identified this issue. Let's start digging in, Meg. Please help us. Where do we start? Do we start with ridding ourselves of the negative talk? I mean, help us out, please. Take us through it.
Sure. So I have a little bit of mindfulness background. The place that I always start is noticing. So if you don't know that you're experiencing something, it's very hard to change it. And a lot of times imposter syndrome comes with some pretty intrusive thoughts. It comes with some really negative self-talk. And so the first thing you can do is just notice when you're having it. Notice that it exists. And even if that means that you're going to write down in your journal, I feel like there's no way that I could possibly do this job. I've ruined my life. It's okay. Write that down. I feel like my client's going to figure out tomorrow that I don't know what I'm doing and they're going to fire me. Write it down. Because if you write it down, then you know that it happened and then you can work with it. You can come up with alternate things to talk about. You can come up with alternate ways to look at the situation. You can come up with examples of why it's not true. But first thing first is just to notice. And the noticing also often helps you to get a little bit unstuck because it goes from being this emotional thing that you're feeling in your body. When you notice it, you kind of like pull it out and you get to like look at it. The way I talk about noticing is I think about the kid who's going to sleep at night and they turn off the light and then they're like, oh my gosh, there's a snake in my room. And so the adult comes back in and they turn on the light and they all look at it and, oh no, it's just a sock. It's like, okay, but like, not just is it a sock, but what kind of sock is it? Is it a tube sock? Is it like an ankle sock? What if it is a snake? What kind of snake? Is it a venomous snake? What are you going to do? The fact that it's in darkness and in the shadows is part of what makes it so scary. And if we can just say it out loud and turn on the light, then it helps us to actually work with it in a more rational and less emotional way. Not that emotions are bad, but oftentimes in this case, the emotions just spin it all up and it helps us to slow it down and actually take a true look at the situation.
Okay, so now we've noticed it. What do we do?
So the next thing that I really like to think about is a notion that I call a micro risk. So this is a way to move forward in the face of fear and also a way to break old habits. I think one of the first times that I took a micro risk was a coach who I found by crying about the fact that I had imposter syndrome. And I was over preparing, as I am known to do. And she really encouraged me to go into a meeting without doing any preparation. And it scared me. But her point was that I actually had the skills already and that I knew what I needed to know. And that all this preparation was really anxiety and fear. And it was one of those meetings that was important, but wasn't the most important meeting of my career. So I did. I went in there. I went in unprepared. It went swimmingly. And I was able to realize that the preparation was just a version of imposter syndrome playing out, telling me that I had to work really, really hard. So a micro risk, in my definition, is a small step. It's a small little experiment where it's big enough that you're going to learn something, but small enough not to have catastrophic consequences.
Like in the case of, this is what rings to my head so loudly, is I think about at the very beginning of this journey where, and I've talked about this before, where networking seemed so scary. You imagine, you have a picture of what it is. It's distasteful. And it's going to look like something that it isn't. And the idea of reaching out to someone and having that conversation and realizing, even if it goes a little strange at first, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but that's what rings so true to me 100%. In my own experiences.
And take networking for an example. So there are people who it is so dreadful to imagine walking into a room and having to network. So maybe sending a DM is actually less scary. So you could use that as the
direct
first
message.
step.
Okay.
A direct message. Maybe direct messaging a stranger is too scary. And so you're just going to message somebody that you worked with 5 years ago that you haven't talked with for a while. If that's too scary, you're going to message your current boss and just say, hey. All of those could be a micro risk toward being better at networking. And it's what's the level that is a little scary, but not flooding your nervous system? And that's going to help you to learn how to do it better. So even if you message your boss, you're going to learn what you should say. And you're going to see how somebody responds to it. And then you can use that when you want to message the stranger.
This very much ties into other things I've read about how confidence comes from repetition. In some ways, that's one of the only ways to gain that confidence.
It does, but I think that for some of us, and this may not ring true for everybody in this audience, but for me, I know that I'm really good at thinking I can do something and then realizing that it was actually more than I really wanted to do and pushing through, but feeling really tired and upset and just drained afterwards. And so what I like about micro risks is that you can titrate them to as big or as small as you want them to be. What I mean by that is it is a repetition, but it's you can increase the level of intensity as you're doing the repetition. Thinking about going to a gym. If you can't do a bench press of 50 pounds, maybe that's very low, but that's probably where I am, then it doesn't make a lot of sense to just sit there trying to work at 50 pounds. And even if you do muscle through it, you're probably going to hurt yourself. So what does it look like to go down to 20 pounds and do a few reps there and come back the next day and go up to 25 and sort of titrate your way up? You're still doing repetitions. You're still working on form, but you're not hurting yourself. And so the micro risk, especially when you have imposter syndrome, which is so emotionally fraught, having a way to dial that back down and put a little bit more agency and control in the individual is a really big piece of it. And then what I want to say about the micro risk is it's not just that you do it. What you have to do afterwards is assess how it went and figure out if you can find what I call your reason to believe. So let's go back to the example where I went into a meeting and I was not prepared. It went well. And so then I come back and assess and I'm like, oh, all that preparation that I do beforehand, I actually already know that. So I have a reason to believe that I don't have to prepare as hard. And so maybe I'm going to take the next meeting and do the same thing. And now I'm getting the repetitions that's breaking the negative patterns. So the micro risk is really about seeing things as an experiment. And there's a lot of concepts here, but I do want to throw this last one at you, which is I have a sticker that says, you can't do this wrong. It's my most popular sticker. And I truly, truly believe that because this, especially in the case of like a micro risk, even if it goes poorly, even if you send that DM and people don't respond or they respond in a hostile way, you've now learned the way you reached out probably wasn't quite right. Maybe you pitch slapped them, as I like to say.
Tried to sell something to them.
Tried to sell something right off the bat. Maybe you didn't have enough connection or rapport with this person, or you didn't explain why you were connected. Maybe they weren't the right target. All of that is helpful. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. It means you just need to change something in the next repetition. And so if we can really see these risks and these steps that we're going through as experiments and information, it sort of changes the whole game. So even for somebody who's a fractional and they have 2 clients and they're trying to find that third and they're struggling, it's like, what are the small things you can do? And after each trial, figure out whether it's working or not, and then how you want to adjust. And it might mean that you're even changing your core offerings, but that doesn't have to be a failure. That means that you're finding the fit between you and the world that's still going to play by enough of your rules that you're happy.
Well, and I'll tell you my personal opinion, I play a doctor on TV sort of opinion. I know when we have doubts, I think it's the definition of courage that we act even when we have doubts. But I also think that acting when we have doubts, in some ways, I actually think is part of the battle itself. As getting busy, waiting for it to land on you is no solution. Moving and motion is one of the best ways to fight it off. Now, you've talked about creating a process. Talk about this, what it is to create the process towards this success and confidence.
I teach people how to deal with doubt and to take risks and to get unstuck. I realize that I've done that a number of times in my life. The RV trip was an example. I lived out in Amish country. All of those, I did small little experiments, figured out that I liked it, and then took the bigger steps. And after seeing myself do this a number of times and helping other people, I realized, oh, there's a process here. And in doing that, I can also say like, okay, this is how I approach my life. This is part of my, not only expertise, but like the way that I work. And it now is no longer like, oh, I just wing it and figure something out. And yeah, I guess I did that thing. It's like, no, my process is that I take micro risks until I find my reason to believe, and then I jump in wholeheartedly. That's my process to creating change. I think a lot of times we hit imposter syndrome because we haven't articulated our process.
You're working me through my issues, Meg, here. This is really what's going on. But I remember getting into this space and trying to figure out how I was going to market my marketing, right? I'm a marketer, and just serendipitously, I don't know, maybe it was just instinctually, but I started writing out my entire marketing methodology. People who've talked to me know that I talk about know yourself first, but then you know, who are you? Who's your customer? Where do you find your customer? What does your customer look like? How do you resonate with the customer? It is literally a process, a methodology that I can take to a prospective client and say, this is how I do that. And it wasn't just a gimmick. It really was me coming to terms with myself. And it was amazing how much confidence I got from that. I'm sorry, my mind is blown. I've got my brains all over my monitor.
Answer us this. When you wrote down that process and you were able to actually take it to your clients, did that help your imposter syndrome?
Totally. From that day forward, I said, this is how I do things. I am that marketer. I'm the marketer who knows something from 21 years who says, this is how I figured it out. And I'll come to you and I'll show it to you. And you're going to look at me and you're going to say, yeah, he knows what he's talking about, because I felt like I knew what I was talking about. I wasn't wondering if I did.
Yeah, exactly. And I heard somebody say that an expert is somebody who has strong opinions. And I think in writing down your own process, you're codifying those opinions. You're showing who you are. And part of what's hard about being an independent contractor, being a solopreneur, being a fractional, is that you're going to have to face the rejection that you're not the right person for everybody. And you're having to do a lot more trials of selling and trying to find that fit than you do when you're in a salaried role, because you did that once for the job interview and now you can stay for as long as you want, basically. I mean, not really.
Right.
That's kind of how it goes. And so I think, having that fodder of this is who I am, and a little bit of also take it or leave it. Like either I'm your person or I'm not, and feeling confident that it's okay if you're not their person because there's somebody else out there for you. So this process thing, it's an insight that I have. There may be other people within the imposter syndrome world that talk about this, but I really wanted to make sure we offered it to everybody here, because my guess is if you had the chutzpah to become a fractional, you also have the knowledge to write down your own process. And by the way, if your process is pretty standard, if it's what you would find in a textbook, I don't think that's a problem either. That just means that you're well-researched and know that you're using a reputable process that works. Great. It still can be that you're an expert in that process, and the application of a process is just as important as coming up with it. So this isn't trying to say that everybody has to have their signature move, but it is giving you the blueprint of how you do your work. And especially I think with fractionals too, you're having to do that work more cyclically, most likely, than you've had to do in the past. Either you have multiple clients and so you're doing the same thing multiple times, or you're in different parts of the process with different people. And so that can even be confusing to try to keep up with all of it. So again, having a process you can go to say, oh, I'm here with this person and I'm here with this person, is a way to intentionally help yourself organize your business.
Oh, fantastic. You've talked to me before about something you call self-distancing, and there's a couple different flavors of that. Tell us about that.
So self-distancing is all about the idea that sometimes we get so in our own stuff that we can't really see objectively what's going on. And I'm sure that you've experienced this when you give advice to a friend and you walk away and you're like, oh, that was really good advice. I really knew what I was talking about. Why can't I do that for myself? Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's dating advice. It's career advice. You're such a good friend, but why can you not be a good friend to yourself? It's because we're just all balled up with our emotions and our fears and all the other stuff. So the quickest trick to get out of that, and there's scientific psychological studies that have proven the power of this, is that you speak to yourself in the third person. You just give yourself advice as if you were the friend. One of my favorite exercises is literally write yourself a letter. You're in a pickle as a fractional trying to figure out what to do with this client. I would write down in a letter, Dear Meg, I know this client is really bothering you. Here's what I would do. Bop, bop, bop. Give your 3 things that you would do, and then you sign it Sincerely, Meg. And if it's too weird to write to yourself, then just mix it up and say oh yeah, my friend Andrew has a similar problem. Hey, dear Andrew, here's what I do. Okay. You can also do it the other way around, by the way. You can be like, Dear Meg, here's what I think as Andrew, blah, 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 and sign it as Andrew. Truthfully, any which way that you do it is helping you to create that distance. And it's all coming from your own brain, but you'd be shocked at what you can come up with.
And I'll tell you what else. I hope I'm not getting out ahead of you here, but when my friend Fatma talked about you with me, she talked about this persona project, and she also positioned it in a way that I thought was fascinating. She said, you know Kobe Bryant, right? I'm like, yeah, I know Kobe Bryant, one of the best basketball players ever to lace him up. She's like, yeah. Do you know he has an alter ego? I'm like, what? It's the Black Mamba. You know Kobe Bryant, you know he's the Black Mamba. And when he's off the court, he's just Kobe Bean Bryant, that dude. But when he goes to the court, he becomes the Black Mamba. And the Black Mamba is the unstoppable force, the impossible to outwit, outwill, out anything. And I would imagine that's the same kind of thing. If something seems bigger than me, well, then I give it to someone for whom it's much easier. Is that about right?
It is. And I think different people have different perspectives on this. There are plenty of examples of athletes and of artists who have personas or alter egos. Sasha Fierce and Beyonce.
Okay.
There's an amazing documentary that I talk about with Serena Williams. She has 5, including one named Summer, who is her personal assistant. And there's this incredible scene in a documentary called Venus and Serena, where Serena is getting massaged because she'd just been in a crazy match. She's signing shoes as Serena Williams, and she's on the phone and she's saying, "Hi, this is Summer with the Williams Invitational. I'd like to secure the catering order." And so
Whoa.
Summer is this person who gets things done for Serena Williams. And she has a different person who comes out on the court, who's the most aggressive person that you've ever seen. So this is a natural phenomenon, but what we can do is we can turn to it, especially when we're feeling like we can't see heads from tails. So another way that we do this that's maybe less, I don't know, grandiose is the right word. I think sometimes people find this to be inaccessible if they think that they have to be the Black Mamba when they're a product manager at a company. But let me tell you how I used it. So I went and became a product manager after being a product designer for a long time. I tried a new role because, again, I'm constantly forcing myself to do new things to then prove that I can do them and then question whether I can do them. So I became a product manager. And my strategy for the beginning of the job was just to say, what would Ryan do? Because he was the best project manager I'd ever met. And so I imagined what Ryan would do, and then I did it. And that allowed me to channel his brilliance in order to be a better version of myself for that situation. So that's the other way that you can use a persona is you can take a pop culture reference or you can take your best colleague. And when I work with clients, they do both. I've had people be Rebecca Welton from Ted Lasso.
Oh, from Ted Lasso.
Yes. And be the badass Rebecca and make incredible gains. I actually just had her, she was a client from 2 years ago who just wrote me on LinkedIn and said, Rebecca's been showing up even more lately and I love it. And I've had people be a really good version of the role and use that as a way to stay true to what they really want and break out of some of their negative behaviors.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, this has been eye-opening and inspiring. Before we go into our lightning round of questionably fractional questions, let me just tie this up together and ask you, if I come across someone right now who feels stuck, whether they've lost a client, they're in a dry spell, they're doubting whether they're cut out for this in the first place, what is the first thing you'd encourage them to do or to remember?
I think the first thing is to remember why you made this choice to begin with to become fractional. Like, get back to your why. I'm not necessarily going this Simon Sinek version, but get back in touch with what you're really trying to do, because that's really grounding and is going to help you as you troubleshoot the rest of it. And then I would also say, if you haven't yet made a process, really write down what it is that you do, how you go about doing it, where you've had successes, and see if there's any insight even in doing that exercise that could help you to know where to go next or could give you a little bit more confidence.
Well, I'm so glad you figured this out, Meg. I'm glad you have totally conquered your fear, your imposter syndrome, just like you have. What are you going to do now that you know all of that in your head?
First and foremost, unfortunately, imposter syndrome, I think, is unconquerable. So I am constantly doing all of the same things that you all are doing here and the things that I suggest. If you're asking where I'm going next with things, I certainly am interested in microrisks and taking that further. I will be completely candid with your audience, which is that I've had some wins and I've had some hardships too. And so I am in my own place of trying to figure out, how do I continue to ultimately go after what I really want and play my own game, which is to offer these insights, to be a full-time coach and speaker and somebody who is giving trainings. I don't do that 100% of my time anymore because it wasn't sustainable. So I also just offer that as, we are works in progress, and I know what game I ultimately want to play. And I also know what game I have to play right now. And I just want to give people permission to be in whatever place they need to be. I know a fractional who ended up going in-house with one of his clients. And he didn't see that as a failure. He saw that as the market was moving in such a direction that he was worried whether he could do all the fractional things. And this was an incredible client. So I just want to give people permission that even within this space of going after your dreams, there are ups and downs, and all of it is a path toward you having a self-actuated whole life. And so I think we're all just in process and doing the best that we can.
Yeah, and I think this comes back to what you said before about knowing what game you're actually playing and making sure when you've got those questions, are you coming from a place of reality or are you just overlaying a comparison that was never meant to be there in the first place? So I think that's wonderful. Well, okay. Well, in that case, I think we've covered this topic. Now we got to go to the most important, most difficult part of our show, which is the lightning round of questionably fractional questions. I don't know if you're ready for this. Don't have the doubt about this because I know you can do this. I have faith. But even if you have to put a little like scary like game show music in your mind, that's still okay. All right. Meg, question 1. What is your one favorite piece of software, app, or technology? And this is something that you use all the time and you can't live without it.
I have a Withings watch. Sounds crazy. Okay. It looks like a normal watch, but it's not. It actually is a step tracker. It actually has a digital screen in here. I don't know if you can quite see it, but see the little digital screen? Yeah. It's a fake out. Okay. But it also has like an analog version of step tracking. I love this thing because it is this perfect blend of technology and not. I can glance at my watch and know what time it is. I also know when somebody is ringing my phone. It's beautiful. And I literally did just live without it because the watch band broke and I was lost. And this is a brand new watch band and I can breathe easier.
Thank you for sharing that secret. I would never have known that secret. Okay, going on. What is your favorite or most influential business book?
I thought about this and I came up with The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it has this schema of how we approach our competence and our work. And there is this distinction between your zone of excellence and your zone of genius. And I might recommend it to your fractional folks because I think those of us who are going off on our own are trying to be in that zone of genius. And it is a scary, scary, scary place. And we often sabotage ourselves. So it might give you some ideas of how to make it through some of the hardest parts of the journey.
Amazing. Next, Meg, what was your all-time favorite vacation or place to visit?
We were on our RV trip and we drove down the dirt road to Badlands at night, and there were bison lined up by moonlight. And then we spent 3 days at a primitive campsite, and there was magic every single day, and I will never forget it.
I love that. Okay, thinking about that now. If you could go back in time, what profession would you have loved to attempt, whether you were successful at it or not?
I was so stuck on this, so I'm just going to give you the first thought that came to mind, which is a midwife.
I love it. No one is going to give me that answer. I love that answer. A midwife. That's awesome. Here's the softball question, easy as can be. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received or lesson you've learned in life?
I had a manager years ago, this relates to imposter syndrome, who told me that I was organized. And I then brought that to my therapist and I was like, I'm so disorganized. Like if you could see like what a mess I am, I think they just think I'm organized because I carry a notebook. And she said, what would happen if you believed people when they told you what they thought of you? And it was such great advice because it is an antidote to imposter syndrome. And it's a way to get out of your own head and face reality, which is that I must have been organized enough that this manager saw it and thought that that was an asset. And so I think that while sometimes other people don't give you good insight, I think when you're finding yourself battling what other people are saying and saying that they're not right, perhaps you're the one who's creating the problem, not them.
Great advice. All right, you made it to the end. Lastly, and I don't know, most importantly, I suppose, where can people learn more about you and your work, Meg Niman?
The best place is www.megniman.com. And I will spell that out because not everybody gets it. It's a little bit of a weird last name. It is MEGNIMAN.com. Notice that there is no E in Niman.
Congratulations, Meg. You made it through unscathed. Well done. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of another edition of Holy Fractional. I want to thank our guest today, Meg Niman, for appearing on the show. And finally, a big thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us today. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and above all, stay fractional.